We begin the European leg of the 2025 Formula 1 season this weekend with the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix around Imola. Now, Imola, of course, has hosted the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix since 2020, but we also have to include the San Marino Grand Prix in this as well, as that was hosted at the circuit between 1981 and 2006. But which are the 5 most memorable, the most incredible moments from this circuit over the years? Well, it's hard to narrow this down to just 5, but I've picked out 5 of my favourites here, the most controversial, the most emotional, the most incredible moments from this circuit over the years. So let's dive in, and let's start in the 1980s. 1982 to be specific. The San Marino Grand Prix was held at Imola, and this was a very controversial race because of the FISA-FOCA war. Now, if you don't know about the FISA-FOCA war, basically just 2 different factions of teams in Formula 1. Now, most of the FOCA-aligned teams actually boycotted this race, so we had a very much reduced field. Now, this was a championship race, though, as we got enough teams to actually compete, and the main one at the front were Ferrari. Their 2 drivers, Didier Pironi and Gilles Villeneuve, were absolutely clear, and this was a very clear 1-2 finish for the 2 Ferraris, and they expected this to be the case as well, so they had a gentleman's agreement going into this. Gilles Villeneuve believed that when the Ferraris were first and second during this race, that they would indeed hold those positions, and Villeneuve was ahead of Pironi in a 1-2 formation after the Renaults retired with mechanical issues. However, Didier Pironi did not believe that was the case, and the 2 contested an incredible battle. It was a real dicing back and forth battle between the 2 of them down the long straights of Imola. This being the Imola, of course, before 1994, where the chicanes were added in. This was a extremely high-speed circuit, not too dissimilar to Monza in all truth, given the average speed of the place. It was an incredible track. It's still a great track now, don't get me wrong, but back then it was an absolute temple of speed, almost, some would say. But yeah, in the end, Pironi did come out on top of Villeneuve, and Villeneuve was absolutely furious. He never spoke to Pironi again, and tragically, this would also end their relationship really at that point. Villeneuve's life would be cut tragically short at the Belgian Grand Prix not too soon after this. While trying to qualify and beat his teammate Pironi, he crashed without his seatbelts done up and was tragically killed in the car. Didier Pironi's career in Formula 1 would also be cut tragically short as well not too long after this, suffering a very horrific crash at the Hockenheimring for the German Grand Prix. So neither of these 2 Ferrari men would compete for Ferrari for much longer. A really, really tragic season was 1982. Maybe I'll do a video about that at some point, because it doesn't really get talked about so much because it's so long ago. But yeah, if we're talking about a pure battle, though, this is one of the best ones we've ever seen at Imola, without a doubt about it. It was incredible seeing these 2 guys absolutely top of the game, really, really throwing elbows and everything out there on the track. But there was absolute insanity 3 years later at the 1985 San Marino Grand Prix. Now, honestly, I'm going to do a video most likely going over this in a bit more detail, but it's essentially the race where everybody ran out of fuel. This was the days of the turbocharged monsters, and of course long before the days of refueling coming back in 1994. We had several different leaders during this race, and almost all of them ran out of fuel during the Grand Prix. Ayrton Senna led from pole position, but he ran out of fuel with 4 laps remaining, believe it or not. Stefan Johansson, who was driving the Ferrari, much to the home crowd's delight, then took up the lead, but he ran out of fuel just 3 laps later. It was then Alain Prost who took over the lead during the final 3 laps and crossed the line in first position. However, he didn't have enough fuel to provide a sample, so he was disqualified. So it was actually a home victory for Elio De Angelis, one of his very few wins in Formula 1. Again, another driver's life that was cut tragically short in Formula 1 in the 1980s. He really could have been a true superstar of Formula 1. Thierry Boutsen, interestingly, he ran out of fuel as well, but he qualified in 2nd place despite that, a lap down on the leader, and Patrick Tambay was a lap down on them as well in 3rd position. Absolutely incredible race. I will probably do an in-depth video going over that because it's one of my favourite unknown races, and of course 2025 marks 40 years since this race occurred, so it's a nice round number to go with there. But let's skip ahead to the 21st century, 2003 San Marino Grand Prix, a very emotional one as well. So before this Grand Prix, the mother of Ralph and Michael Schumacher, Elizabeth, passed away, so there were questions about whether both of these drivers would actually compete during this Grand Prix, but they did compete, and they absolutely did a fantastic job in those circumstances. Michael Schumacher dominated the weekend as a whole, taking pole position. Interestingly, his brother Ralph in second place, the only two guys really close to each other there, only missing out on pole position by 14 1,000ths of a second, just over 1/100th of a second. Ralph would finish in fourth place, just off the podium, and Michael Schumacher would dominate the weekend, as he did so often around Imola. 7 victories around Imola, more than anybody else did Michael Schumacher have. But he could have had an 8th, he could have had a 7th at the time and an 8th overall, had he managed to get past Fernando Alonso in 2005. Now, of course, this is an infamous battle in the UK because they decided to throw an advert break, did ITV, just as the battle was really heating up in the closing stages. But if you go back and watch the battle itself, it was fantastic. Now, Michael Schumacher did not have the best Ferrari in 2005. He was eventually usurped for his crown by Fernando Alonso, but it was these two guys that was really battling it out during this race. For some reason, the Ferrari in the hands of Michael Schumacher worked so well around this track, and he did a fantastic job to go all the way from 13th on the grid to second place by the end, and really he was the fastest guy on the track in the closing stages. But Alonso's defending was absolutely incredible. Some people saying, you know, oh well, Formula 1 cars, they can't overtake, that's the only reason why Schumacher couldn't get past. But he went from 13th to second, you can clearly pass around that track. But Alonso did a fantastic job in defending, and it was one of the all-time great battles in Formula 1 between these two giants of the sport, and a bit of a preview as well to their battles in 2006 for the Formula 1 World Championship in that year as well. And the last moment, the only one that is classified as a Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, the 2021 edition. This is without a doubt the best Grand Prix we've had at Imola since it has returned to the calendar, and an example of what the weather can produce here, because it was a wet race and it was a very controversial one as well. It was one of the first direct battles between Sir Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen on track during that season. Of course, the season where they would battle it out for the World Championship. One of the best seasons of all time, in my opinion. And this is one of the best races ever held at Imola, in my opinion. It was absolute chaos. And they actually managed to finish 1 and 2 in this one. Now, of course, Max Verstappen and Hamilton, they had a bit of a battle going through the Tamburello chicane. Hamilton coming off worse because of that. We also had the very controversial crash between Valtteri Bottas and George Russell in this one as well. Who's at fault for that one? Jury's still out really when it comes to that, but that was very much a passing of the baton, a changing of the guard really when it came to that, because of course Russell would go on to replace Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes the following year. And Hamilton did amazingly well to actually recover in this one, because he spun out around halfway through the race. Now, Verstappen in the end did dominate this Grand Prix, won by a big margin, 22 seconds, but shout out to Sir Lewis Hamilton, who managed to recover from 9th place at the restart after the red flag all the way up to 2nd place. No mean feat around a track where it is very difficult to overtake, particularly in the modern Formula 1 era. But yeah, those are 5 of the most incredible, unbelievable moments from Imola over the years, whether it's the San Marino Grand Prix or the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. I absolutely love this track. I think it should stay on the calendar for the foreseeable future. I hope that Formula 1 shares my opinion, but you know me guys, I'm not exactly optimistic when it comes to that, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully I'm wrong on that. Hopefully they announce during this weekend that Imola does get an extension with its contract, but we'll see what happens. Like, share, comment, subscribe if you want to see more like this, guys, and yeah, we'll see you soon for some more Formula 1 content here on the channel. Have a great day wherever you are in the world today.